So hi everyone, we're back at HR Tech Fest in beautiful Sydney. I'm here with Michael Kim, who I've seen before, previous resident of New York, now resident of Sydney, this town.
That's right.
So this is a home show for him. Michael, your talk today, give us the core of what you were trying to get across in the 1 minute version.
Yeah, sure. So I was here actually last year, almost a year ago, talking about life at Spotify and what our people strategy is from a global perspective. Being on this side of the world for the past year now, it was a continuation of last year's presentation, but really talking about what life at Spotify was or is from an APAC perspective. Looking at what life at Spotify is for our offices in Japan, India, Australia, Singapore, etc. And really having this very heavy theme about being mindful of what it means to be global versus what it means to be local. And this shift in mindset of, believing that local wins a market more so than global at this point. So really reshifting and understanding the proportional kind of focus from being 80% globally driven to then being 80% locally driven.
Okay, so what's the difference between New York and here, firsthand?
Sure. Well, firsthand here in Australia, we have an amazing team of around 45 Spotifyers focused on winning the market in Australia for Spotify, where in New York, we have a team of over 1,500 employees. So certainly from an HR cultural perspective, the culture is much different. It's much more personal here. It's much more of a family culture, but also how do we still focus on delivering the results on a local level with a team of 45 versus that of a 1,500 person office.
Okay, so you mentioned a little bit about global versus local, or something I've heard going back a couple of years, people used to talk about glocal. To say that we would all be glocal, we'd be global, but we'd be local. And globalization's coming for good and bad, plenty of bad press at the moment. So if you were going to boil it down to something about how you are successful on a global basis while operating in some really different environments.
Absolutely.
When you're talking about Japan, Japan to Sydney and so on. Depending on your US experience. What does that come down to? What's the key?
Yeah, I think it's come down to anchoring ourselves as a Swedish-born company where we strive from a cultural perspective to really have our Swedish roots embedded in all of our offices.
What does that actually mean though?
It means
meatballs on a Friday.
It means everything from the way we believe from an HR perspective, how we build our people strategy, how we look at work-life balance, how we look at performance development over performance management, how we look at building a culture of learning and engaging with our people that's very different from your traditional, I guess, US corporations, for example.
So if you took that to Japan, because this is the final question, I'm really interested in this. You took this work-life balance, take for example, somewhere like Japan, where it's kind of work-life or life-work being the opposite thing. What does that mean in reality?
Sure.
How do you deliver that?
And we're living through that right now, actually, and we're having conversations with our staff in Japan about this. It's about realizing who we are in Japan as an entity, right? We are still an international company in Japan representing Spotify. We're not a traditional local Japanese company. So it's about a balance. How do we create a balance where we create a work environment that resonates with Japanese culture locally, but anchors respecting the culture, but still being mindful of the type of company you're working for, specifically here, Spotify. So for example, our parental leave of 6 months fully paid for mothers and fathers is unheard of in Japan. And in any other traditional Japanese company, that program would never exist. Even culturally, from a norm perspective, a father taking 6 months off in Japan just doesn't make sense.
And does that happen?
But it's Spotify Japan, it does happen, right? And I think that's a great example of where our global values seeds into our local culture.
And makes you attractive.
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
So it's been a good win for us. Yeah.
Thank you for that example. It's great to see you again.
No worries, Bill. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right.